Hey, what's up everybody? It's Christian with Reaper Disc, and today we're going to be taking a look at the Elevation Disc's Interceptor. The Interceptor is Elevation Disc's very first mold and their go-to overstable mid-range. Now, the big thing about Elevation, and if you're any familiar with the company, you'll know this already, but for those of you who aren't, Elevation has made a name for themselves out of using rubber instead of plastic to mold their discs. Now, they're not the first company to do this, but they are doing it a little bit differently than has been done before. Elevation only has a handful of molds in their lineup currently, and almost all of them revolve around approaching the green and getting up next to the basket. In this regard, they are surpassing expectations from nearly everyone. All of their discs have one thing in common, and that is that rubber construction. And with that, they're able to produce a disc that when it hits something, or hits the ground rather, it stays. And then if it does hit something in the air, it dies on the spot. Typically, if you clip a tree with this thing, it's going to absorb all of the impact and then fall back to the ground instead of ricocheting you 100 feet off the fairway. That is all due to the rubber material used in these discs. On top of that, they also come in a vast assortment of amazing colorways. You'll have to check all of them out. I can't even begin to list them, but they're absolutely beautiful. So the really cool thing about this, unlike other discs that are made out of plastic, that are, even the soft ones, are still pretty rigid, you can fold this thing up, you can wad it up into a ball if you wanted to. You can throw it down on a backpack and take it, with you wherever, and then pops right back to normal. So about the Interceptor itself. The Interceptor is a pretty overstable mid-range that I was having trouble getting to hold a turnover. It's actually really overstable. This is going to be a really good approach disc to the basket that no matter what, no matter how you need to contort it, if you know that it's going to need to fade at the end of the flight, this is going to be a great disc for that. So when I threw this disc on a hyzer, it hyzered. I got it to fly fairly straight, but for the most part, it held the hyzer angle the entire flight. Whenever it hit the ground, again, as expected, had almost no ground play whatsoever. It just hit and stuck. When I threw it flat, it flew straight for a little while, and the moment it started slowing down a little bit, it immediately started fading and finished almost identical to the hyzer release. When I threw it on anhyzer, I did get some flex out of it, and it had that very just typical force over flex shot shape, just on a smaller scale. Started out wide on an anhyzer, floated down, flattened back out, pendulum back over as it faded at the end. Honestly, all in all, a very beautiful flight. And like I said, just typically, or on a smaller scale than would be typical with that sort of flight. No matter how I threw this, even throwing it full power, I couldn't get the thing over 240, 250 feet. And as you're seeing now, when I did throw this thing full power, it got a little bit of flip. It rode straight for a little bit, but as it slowed down, it still faded. It was ultra reliable in that fact, and that's something that, is a big plus. No matter what you do to this disc, it's going to do the same thing at the end every single time. And having that sort of, the ability to replicate that shot shape every single time and being consistent is going to make your approach way, way easier to do. So especially for us East Coast guys, having something that you can rely on while being able to be out in the woods and on the side of a hill, like most of our courses are out here, this is going to be a nearly invaluable tool to add to your bag. All in all, I was actually really impressed with the Interceptor. It was, it's great at doing what it's supposed to do. Outside of that, uh, you can kind of get into some other arguments, but as an overstable approach disc, this thing checks all the boxes on top of having, no ground play. So if you are in that really technical situation where you're approaching a dangerous green and you need to land it by the basket and just not move, this is going to be a really, really good disc for that. If you want to get an Interceptor for yourself, head on over to reaperdisc.com to grab one there, check out all of the other discs he has in stock, and maybe check out some awesome apparel. Again, I'm Christian with Reaper Discs, and I'll see you guys in the next video.